So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thanks so much for taking some time to join me and the team at Eckhart Yoga today. We're really grateful for your presence. We appreciate life is busy and full, and we hope to offer you something that you can take away that will be an understanding of how to apply the practices of Yoga Nidra to the arena or the forum of resilience. That really is what today's theme is all about. But perhaps more than that, an overview of how Yoga Nidra is in many ways a life tool that can be a tremendous support for the people that may be coming to your classes and the courses that you run, or maybe that you're planning to run. So my name's James Reeves. I'm the author of the Book of Rest, and I've been very invested in learning about rest for a long period now, a good 20 years or so. And I also run an organization called Deep Rest. And as the name suggests, it's all about how to rest initially, but ultimately what rest reveals to us, that there is always a calm core at the very center of our experience that we could describe as awareness or consciousness. And as we learn some of the tools and practices that are available through things like Yoga Nidra, we can start to reveal and access that real deep, calm centeredness that may be missing for us. It's always there in the background, but it gets covered up by stress and intensity, overwhelm, burnout, some of the themes that we'll talk about today. So, seeing as we're looking at this through the framework of resilience, I thought I'd take a moment to define for you a take on what resilience is. Now, I live in Oxfordshire in the UK, and I've felt it important to reference the Oxford English Dictionary as a good benchmark for descriptions and for definitions of things. So if you look up in the Oxford English Dictionary, you don't have to have one on your desk or by your bedside. You can just Google it. You can look up that definition for yourself, but it defines resilience in two different ways. The first definition is of a toughness, the ability to withstand difficulty. Now, for those of you who are already somewhat immersed in the well-being world, and we could call it an industry as well, you'll be familiar with things like the recent uptake in the idea of taking cold showers or ice baths. We might use breathing techniques to help us take on more, is perhaps a simple way to describe it. How we can build our resilience and our capacity for more and more and more stress. But what's interesting about that definition of resilience is that it is also designed as a malleability, as an ability to bend but not break in the face of adversity, and to be flexible and adaptable. So that to me is very interesting, because on the one hand, resilience is being presented as a, like a shield wall or an armor that we might put on that helps us take on more. And yet, on the other hand, it's presenting this idea of being malleable and adaptable. And that to me points to a softer side of resilience that I'm very interested in. Now, if we're also considering that well-being world for a moment, and that also as an industry, which that's the truth of it, is something that we may be working within too, we can consider, or we may already know, that there is a huge growing interest in the softer side of yoga practices. People are being drawn towards yin yoga classes, restorative classes, and since the 10, 15 years now that I've been offering Yoga Nidra, I've seen a huge increase in interest and demand. Back in the days when I first started teaching this, I mostly offered physical yoga classes. And I put on a physical yoga class and there'd be 20 people with a waiting list. And I put on a Yoga Nidra class and there'd be 2 people that would come. But that really changed over the last few years. And that to me points to a kind of perennial or universal truth that a lot of people in the world are overwhelmed. They have a lot of information coming in at them. They have a lot of roles and responsibilities. Life is fast, possibly faster than it's ever been before. And within it, there tends to be a kind of unconscious fear of keeping up with artificial intelligence, maybe, or keeping up with the latest trend, or keeping up with everyone else that seems to create these perfect lives via social media. Whatever it may be, there's a tremendous desire to run and stay maybe ahead of the game or keep up with society and that great busyness that seems to be almost like a mass mania. So people are returning or turning towards more restorative, restive, contemplative practices as an antidote to that intensity, stress, and fast-paced living. So Yoga Nidra fits in so beautifully with this, because if we make it very simple for a moment, what Yoga Nidra is about stopping and resting. And it's also an invitational moment for whoever's participating in the practice to be with themselves as they are, and to inquire into their experience in the body, in their emotional world, and into the mind with curiosity and warmth and receptivity. So this isn't a practice that's really about getting somewhere or necessarily having a great outcome or improving ourselves, but it's much more a reflective kind of practice that's about turning inward and being with ourselves. And what I'd like to do now is spend maybe 15 minutes or so talking about the practices of Yoga Nidra and the journey that we go on when we engage in this practice within the framework of resilience. So if we consider maybe someone who is interested in coming to a class or a course that you might be offering, or has some need or desire to learn about Yoga Nidra, probably the first most helpful reflection is that you're going to be able to offer them some simple tools that will help them recover from feelings of being overwhelmed, feelings of intensity, feelings of so much information coming in, so much on the to-do list, so much to work out and know, so much to keep up with. And to offer them something very simple that's across the board. This is fairly universal in Yoga Nidra, that's really about quote unquote relaxing. I mean, I'm not entirely convinced that it is about relaxing, because people can feel very restless during these practices. But let's say it's about going on a journey where initially they're exploring why, the reason that they're wanting to stop and to rest. Now, in the world of Yoga Nidra, and there is obviously a huge range of different styles of teaching this practice, but a fairly common approach in Yoga Nidra is to make intentions. And lots of people get confused about why. Why am I making intentions? What are the intentions about? Am I making intentions for my life or for myself or for this practice? And really something that you'll learn through the program that we're offering at Eckhart Yoga is how to make very simple but meaningful intentions. Firstly, for yourself, because if you're going to share this in the world and be a teacher of this, you need to have had your own experience of the practice. But how to get very clear about the why. Why is it that I want to stop? Why do I need to rest? And the answers to that might be, I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I'm tired, I need a break. They're all of the driving factors. And what you'll learn through the program is how we can begin to turn around from the problem. I'm doing this today because I'm feeling burnt out or I'm feeling very stressed, into the outcome. What is it that the person that's attending this class or course or doing this practice with you, or what is it that you want for yourself? Do you want to feel calm or at ease? Do you want to experience a quieter mind? Do you want some distance from your thoughts? Do you want to get to know the emotions that have been knocking on your door for the last week? So asking this question, why am I doing this practice? What would I like to get from this? Is really intention making. And it's that simple. And once we can get clear as to why, we can simply say those words down inside of ourselves. I wish to feel calm. We say that word calm, calm, calm 2 or 3 times quietly in the inner voice. And we've made that very simple intention. Now, I see across the board, and certainly in training courses that I run live, a lot of people get their knickers in a knot about intention making. What does it really mean? Gosh, it could be really complex. What kind of intention should I be making? I've read this lovely long list of different intentions, but I don't know which ones are for me. And asking that very simple question, well, what do you want? What's really important to you? Why are you doing this practice? Can really help people get to something simple and allow them to affirm it to themselves. And once they have that intention, it's like an anchor that will keep them coming back and back and back for the practice. It becomes very clear to them as to the why. And just as a kind of brief, it's not really an aside, but in addition to this, there are really a few barriers to us stopping and resting. Sometimes people will say, I don't have the time for this. Really, what's underneath that is that it's not a priority to me. I'm not valuing rest. I'm not valuing myself enough. People may feel guilty about taking time to stop, and we can help transform guilt into responsibility, because very quickly you'll know, if you do this practice regularly for yourself, and people who come to your classes and courses will have this experience, that they can begin to move from that sense of overwhelm and intensity, and particularly that flavor of guilt, like I'm not worth doing this practice, because if they do it a few times, they'll realize, well, I'm calmer, I'm better emotionally regulated, I have more concentration and ability to focus. These are all the research-backed outcomes of resting. But perhaps more than that, and more simply than that, you're just a much nicer human when you take a break, when you rest. It will uncover your goodness all over again. So we might feel guilty about stopping and resting, yet when we look at it more fully and honestly, we're actually doing everybody in our life a service by stopping, because we're likely to respond to them in new and interesting and maybe kinder and less reactive ways when we're rested. So we can break through that sense of guilt. Sometimes people can be afraid of meeting themselves as well, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, or I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few moments. So the first phase of Yoga Nidra is really about setting intention, getting clear as to why I'm doing this, and in a simple way, learning to rest your attention in sensation and with the breath. Excuse me for a moment, I'm just going to take a sip of water. And there's something very simple, very beautiful about learning to come out of our mind, because minds produce a lot of thoughts, and when we are feeling overwhelmed, or we're feeling the intensity of life, it tends to trigger a few qualities of the mind. Our mind moves into recursive loops of thinking, and there is a negativity bias in the default part of our mind called the default mode network. That means we tend to look at challenges in our life with a kind of pessimistic view. So we go around these loops of thought. If I do this, and if I say this, then maybe that person will do that, and then what will happen? And I think we all understand the nature of the mind. Almost all of you will have had some experience of that. So we can start to slip from being stuck in those loops of thought, which is a kind of simple moment when we lay down and rest, and suddenly we're just caught up in the mind, and we can swap out thinking for feeling. So it helps us initially transition from being lost in the mind into sensing and feeling our body. And we're learning to welcome sensation as it is. And in the program, there's a few different approaches, but essentially we might tour through the body as sensation, starting in the tongue, moving our attention down to the toes. We might start in one hand and move through one side of the body, and then start in the other hand and move through the other side. We could go from feet to the top of the head. It's helpful to start in sensitive areas in the body. For example, in the mouth, we have lots of sensation on the lips, on the tongue. You'll know that if you've ever taken a sip of a drink that's a little too hot, it hurts. And we also have lots of sensation in these. So actually, just as a way to experience that, and as a nice little moment for you to transition from thinking into feeling, just take a moment with me now. You don't even need to close your eyes, but you can do if you'd like to. And just feel your hands. Just feel the sensation of your hands for a few moments. Feel the palms and all of the fingers and the thumbs and the backs of the hands. And feel how the hands touch out into the surrounds. They may be touching the air, or they may be touching a surface or some clothing. And really, for a few moments, just feel into the hands. And then just notice what happens to thinking as you're feeling the hands. What happens to the mind? And then when you're ready to, you can open your eyes and bring your attention back into the cool. So many of you will know that experientially, and it's one of the great gifts that movement practices that Hatha Yoga has to offer the world, is making that transition from being stuck in our heads into our body. But the relief can be found for lots of people who are interested in practicing Yoga Nidra, that I don't have to do anything with my body. I don't have to move anymore. I don't have to, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it's a great thing to have a movement practice, but now I can enjoy all of the things that I used to enjoy about a movement class, but lie down and be still and allow my nervous system to recover and rest, even whilst I'm having that enjoyable experience of moving from thinking into feeling. And this also helps develop our capacity for concentration. So we're able to be less distracted, more focused with our attention, initially by moving our attention around the body, which is traditionally called a body scan. It's also in things like mindfulness. Some of you will be familiar with that. And then as we've toured through the body as sensation, we then start to move into experiencing the breath. And this is like going from running super fast, being in our minds, into walking, taking our attention slowly through the body, where we're not asking for the attention to be focused on one thing just yet, but we're allowing it to move around. And that can help with things like restlessness in the practice, because at least we're having some attentional focus that's moving. And then as the mind starts to slow down, as we're more and more embodied into sensation, then can come the moment where we can tend to the breath. We can feel the breath experientially as a life force, as an aliveness in the body. And there are a number of different ways that we can explore and be with the breath in Yoga Nidra practices. For example, doing side breathing, where we can take a breath in, pause and feel one side of the body as we breathe out and breathe in, and then at the top of the breath, move our attention to the other side and breathe out and breathe in. These kind of practices develop a tremendous amount of attentional focus, but in a very relaxed way, because it can be really challenging to ask people to just simply stop when they've been running in their minds, or running through their lives, and to make that hard stop into doing just one thing, just paying attention to the breath. So there's a journey that we can take people on and skillfully weave all of these different possibilities, and you'll learn all about them in the program. There's a number of different approaches to how we can work with the breath to develop that capacity to be more one-pointed, more centered, and come out of the mind. The last thing that I'd say about the breath, and this is a gorgeous Yoga Nidra inquiry and something that comes from the teachings of Kashmir Shaivism or Tantra, which is there's a moment as our nervous system starts to settle when we're resting in Yoga Nidra, where when we're observing our breath, we'll exhale all of the way out, and for a moment, the breath disappears. And then it reappears as an inhalation, and we breathe all the way in, and then we breathe out, and then there's a moment where the breath disappears again. So as the nervous system gets more and more relaxed, these natural pauses take place in the breath that can be hard to access for people who are still experiencing that sense of intensity or tension in the body and the mind. So this is just a beautiful moment to ask and inquire into what happens in that moment where the breath disappears. And what we're enabling people to do is have an experience of being the observer. Because for most of us, our attention is always bound in the objects, in this case in the breath. But in that moment that the breath disappears, what's left behind is just simply observing, just watching. So this starts to reveal in that moment that the breath disappears, that there's something here that's watching, that's observing. And it may be the first glimpse of consciousness or sentience that participants in your classes and courses may get, or an articulate description of recognizing that there's something here that's unchanging, still, quiet, always calm, always at peace, that's observing the breath as it disappears and reappears again. And this getting to know consciousness or getting to know that sentience is such a tremendous gift, because to me it's the beginning of the end of suffering, where we realize that there's something calm and quiet and centered within us that is undisturbed, that's always been okay. So not only are people getting this tremendous recovery possibility by being given permission to rest and given techniques that help them come out of their mind, so it's a very structured moment of rest, but also they're starting to get a deep insight into the very depth promises of yoga, which is to access that quiet calm. This also happens in other ways, like simply when people are taking a Yoga Nidra practice, and here's the maybe the kicker or the disappointment for us as teachers, some people are going to fall asleep in your classes, or they're going to drift in and out of listening to the practice of Yoga Nidra. And in the drifting in and out, they're entering into what's called the hypnagogic state. Now that hypnagogic state is like a kind of between sleep and awake place that is deeply tranquil and relaxing. You all know it. You pass through it every night when you go to sleep. And it's that lovely kind of, oh yeah, I can feel myself starting to be taken by sleep. The mind starts to slow down. It stops producing beta waves, which are the fast flow of thinking, and slips into that kind of quieter, more watching a sunset or looking at a beautiful view, or, listening to some calm, relaxing music at home. It just naturally creates that state in our brain. So in some ways, we're there busy as teachers trying to create this gorgeous experience, but someone may be simply drifting in and out of sleep, and as a result of that, feel incredibly tranquil just through being in that holding environment of you offering a class or a course or some kind of online Yoga Nidra offering. So all of that is to say that as a baseline, there's a tremendous amount of well-being that can be recovered. And it's helping people all around the world. This practice is helping people all around the world calm down, slow down, feel at ease, and recover something that's naturally within them. And this is what's gorgeous, is that we're not creating some state. In some ways, we're taking away all of the things that are a distraction to uncover or exemplify that there is a deep tranquility and calm within us. And actually all we need to do is make a commitment to stop and do less. So that's Yoga Nidra across the board. And you can learn about those tools and techniques in lots of different ways. What makes the program that we're offering here maybe stand out and pop a little bit is that the person that I've learned this from, and going on my own journey for the last 15 years, there is an intersection of psychology and yoga, or we might say psychology and contemplative practices. And they actually meet very beautifully. And for me to give you the framework for this, there's a teaching that has influenced Buddhism, yoga, Taoism as well, And it's kind of woven through all of these different contemplative styles and traditions. That is called Kashmir Shaivism, or you may know it as Tantra. And Tantra essentially says that rather than trying to get up and away from the difficulty and pain of our humanness, that everything is an opportunity to practice. So Tantra really says feelings that you have, inner emotional experience, thoughts, images, memories, all of the psychological content that we may be wanting initially to get away from because we're overwhelmed and flooded by it. Actually, there's something very beautiful about inquiring into it. So once we've reached that baseline that I just spent the last 15 minutes or so talking about, that sense of ease and calm and well-being is installed again. Many of us might think, well, that's the end of it, isn't it, James? We're done. That's great. Thank you very much. And some people will just want that in your classes. But here's what's interesting is for all of us, when we've discovered a technique, this one being Yoga Nidra, but it could be anything that helps you calm down and feel centered. And then you go back into life and somebody says something or something happens and you get triggered again. And then you need to roll out your mat or you need to lay down and do your Yoga Nidra practice again to calm down. At a certain point, might it not be interesting to turn towards what triggered you and get to know it and come into right relationship with it and understand it? So the next phase of Yoga Nidra that we're offering through the program, and something that is really, I believe, very particular to what we're offering here on Eckhart Yoga, is a very deep dive into emotional intelligence and really helping you first and then giving you the tools so that you can help other people be in the right relationship with their inner world. Because emotions are generally split into two camps. There's the ones that we like, happiness, love, joy, celebration, gratitude. And then there's the ones that we don't like so much: sorrow, pain, grief, anger, despair. But here's the truth. All of those emotions are here to tell us something. And all of them are instructive in certain ways. And they're either revealing to us, they're showing us something about us that's out of date, outworn, that may be a response from a young part of ourselves that feels frozen in time or traumatized or unable to relate to the world as it is now. Maybe, just maybe, and this is what's interesting for those of us that inhabit yoga land, maybe anger's trying to tell us something. Maybe there's a message in there, and when we listen to it well, and we really get clear that anger, once we get past that bit, I want to smash the place up, I'm feeling so cross. When we get to the message, why do you want that anger? Well, so-and-so said something to you, and okay, right, that's really interesting. Can you say more? And as we start to dialogue with and get in touch with anger as a sensation in the body, as images and memories that may come to us, as an emotional tone, and we see it as a messenger, we may get that what anger is really asking us to do is hold a boundary with somebody or change the way that we're responding to a particular situation. When we hear the message, the anger can dissolve. And it helps us move past a natural human thing, which is suppression. Let me put the lid on that one. That's not very nice. And then acting out, because the lid only lasts so long. And I think we all know if we try and hold on to a particular emotion that keeps coming around and around and around, one day it's going to pop up and overwhelm you and possibly overwhelm the person that it's directed towards too. So we need a forum, we need a way to inquire into why we get triggered, why we're feeling overwhelmed, why we're unable to cope with the stress of our life, or why we find this person so difficult. And what's beautiful within the teachings of Kashmir Shaivism is that it's this very invitational whole embrace of self. And for me personally, this has made just a tremendous difference in my life, to be able to inquire into and be with the different textures and tones of my emotions, beliefs, thoughts that I'm having, which in some ways we might see as a disturbance or a problem back there at the beginning of the description when I said coming out of the mind. But now from that calm steadiness, we can begin to turn toward this content within ourselves and work through it and listen to it and get the messages and deepen our authenticity. So that piece of emotional intelligence has been life-changing for the hundreds of people that have come through this program and other programs that I offer. And it's this beautiful, like I said, this beautiful intersection of really psychology, Western psychology, and yogic tradition. That is this invitation to welcome ourselves fully as we are. And if you really lean into that for a moment, isn't it just such a gift, such a beautiful possibility that there's nothing wrong with us? That actually everything that we're experiencing is a messenger and could be heeded and listened to. And if we pay due diligence and care to those messages, we're going to be able to find the right response in life. Now, that may go completely against the conditioning that you had. Maybe the family that you grew up in said, no, it's not okay to express certain emotions, or, oh, emotions are just tricky, stay away from them. But actually, my proposition, and this is what I see to be tremendously powerful for so many people, is that what you're thinking and feeling, there's nothing wrong with it. And if you can listen to it and really get to what's underneath and get the insight, it will change your life and it will deepen your sense of authenticity. So if phase one of Yoga Nidra practice is calm down, slow down, feel well again, recover that natural disposition that we have through a settled nervous system and finding our quiet self. And phase two is this willingness to meet, greet, and welcome and be with the entire landscape of our inner world. It leads towards what I believe to be a couple of really important possibilities. The first being, it leads towards genuine authenticity, that we now know and trust ourselves again. And there's nothing that we need to turn away from inside. And it's the beginning of the end of the war that can rage inside us of going, oh, I really don't like this bit of me, but I'm prepared to show this bit to the world because that's acceptable. And it allows us to turn inside ourselves and build self-trust within. None of us can ever make a statement to say that we're safe in the world. The world is sometimes a crazy place, a beautiful place too. But we can learn to be safe with ourselves and listen to ourselves and trust ourselves. And as we do that, a deep authenticity and a deep sense of well-being and okayness within ourselves naturally spills out into the world. And through learning to trust and listen to ourselves, we build this capacity to always know the right thing to do, always know the right response. Maybe listening to those inner messengers means that we need to do something that's courageous or new for us, which might be saying no when we've always said yes, or saying yes when we've always said no. But it does allow us to come back to a very deep sense of self-trust. Within the practice of Yoga Nidra too, I mentioned earlier that hypnagogic state that we'll always be drifting in and out of. That state has been used throughout the world, famously for thousands of years now, by luminaries in the scientific community and the creative community as a way to gain insight. And when we stop, and when we rest, and when we dip in and out of sleep, when we come into that hypnagogic state, we get insight. We see new possibility. We may come out of a Yoga Nidra practice. The participants that come and take this program will come out of a Yoga Nidra practice and see a new possibility of responding to an old conundrum or challenging situation. This builds now a capacity to trust in the practice and trust in rest. Because when we're doing that figuring out, I talked about it earlier, those loops of thought that we go around and around and around in. And we can begin to come out of the mind, come into the body, rest, be with our emotional world, be with our inner world, and know that we may come out of the practice with an insight, with a new possibility, with a sense of, oh, actually, now I know how I need to respond to this. it can completely transform our lives. And we can begin to give up the need to rely, excuse me, solely on the mind as a problem solving technique. And we can go, well, actually, maybe I didn't need to figure that one out now. Maybe I can stop and rest and find some quietness. And the new insight comes from that spaciousness. And I mean, we could go into a long conversation about it. This is a webinar, so I'm trying to be brief, but where that insight comes from in some ways is a mystery. Are we, connected and plugged into each other in some kind of way? Are we plugged into some kind of greater knowing or greater source? I'll be honest with you and say some of the insights I've had over the years have been very left field. There's no way I would have thought of it. And it remains a mystery as to where that comes from, but it's a beautiful thing to know that there is knowing and wisdom within us if we're willing to get quiet and stop. So that's really Yoga Nidra and resilience. The program that we're offering you is in depth. I spent a long time poring over the content, putting it all together. It's filmed now probably 4 or 5 years ago now in a studio with a very good friend of mine. We spent a lot of time and care really just getting this right for you. So the training or the program will take you on a progressive journey where we'll walk you through those steps that I've mentioned. And within it, there are also scripts that you'll receive. So you'll be able to receive, or you will receive, a master script that will help you start to develop your own script for teaching Yoga Nidra, because you can use my words, but at a certain point, it'd be better if you find and use your own. It will feel much more like yours and much less like someone else's. So you'll be encouraged to and invited to begin to create your own script, but we'll give you some templates for you to be able to use. There's audio recordings of practices in there too, which come as little snippets. So when you learn a teaching theme, so for example, we might take a theme like welcoming, the one that I talked about, like what is it to welcome our whole self, or a theme like working with opposites, which I've not touched into too much in this webinar, but is a very classical theme within Yoga Nidra. And then there's the opportunity to take a brief practice and actually try experientially that practice of opposites for yourself, along with a master practice that is quite long and lengthy, but will be the opportunity for you to go the whole journey through Yoga Nidra. And then we'll break down what are called the koshas for you. So the koshas are the body, how you work with body scans and how you can bring attention into physical self. Then there's the pranamaya kosha, the subtle energy, the animating life force that brings life to the physical self, that we can inquire into through the breath and this variety of different practices that I've mentioned. And then the manamaya kosha, which is the realm of our emotions, and then into the Vijnanamaya kosha, which includes thoughts, beliefs, and our sense of self. And then ultimately, beyond all of that sense of personalness, into silence, into quietness, and into our beingness. So the program is structured in that way, and then offers you at the end some reflections on how you can begin to teach it. Because there's one thing learning and understanding it for yourself, but there's another thing about how do I put this together as a program? How do I offer this to a group? And I'm very keen on supporting you to build something with structure and depth, because there's a lot of Yoga Nidra practices out there. In truth, if you or somebody else wanted to practice Yoga Nidra, you could go onto YouTube. I'm not saying it's all good. In fact, I've listened to some of the stuff on YouTube and some of it's really questionable, but there are some good practices out there. But a lot of the time, people don't know what they're doing in Yoga Nidra. People may be asked to make an intention with no idea of how or the framework for it. People may be invited to inquire into opposites, but without any real educational piece or structure. So when you're starting to put together your offerings, you can think about stepping out of, I just want to offer a general class of Yoga Nidra, into how can you offer an in-depth course that's really a personal development program that might You might frame it as a resilience program in the way that I've talked about it today, or Yoga Nidra for stress, Yoga Nidra for sleep. They're the big topics. They're the things that people are fascinated in. I mean, if you offer something that's about helping people access a deeper capacity for sleep, they'll be queuing up out of your door. So this part of the program really focuses on how can you think about bringing this into the world in a way that's structured, educational, progressive, and isn't just a kind of, oh, well, this is Yoga Nidra and we'll just lie down and have a nice time, but really shows people the depth and breadth of possibility within the practice. Because for me, it's very rich and deep, and there's so much that can be helpful in terms of not just mindset, but really people learning some life tools as to how to be with themselves. Within the program, we also offer you some personal mentoring time. So as part of the package, you get a personal call with me where I'll offer you some mentoring, which you can use at any time in the program. You might use it if you're a bit stuck or confused. Sometimes people save it up to the end and they're like, oh, it's really nice to meet you. And it's a bit strange for me because they've been watching me for the last 30 hours in terms of recorded content, but we're meeting for the first time. But people have found that really helpful, because actually to move through a program online is one thing, but to have some real life support actually can really bring this to life and help you be much more accountable for the program and give you that feeling of being supported. So we really felt that was important, and we wanted to weave that into the program too. Now, as I understand it from my partners at Eckhart Yoga, we're offering those of you on this call and those of you that are going to listen to the recording the option of a 20% discount. So there's a discount code that may be in the chat box now, I haven't checked, or will be in the chat box soon, that you can use. And we'll also email that to everybody that's been on this call or is watching the recording. This is your opportunity to take that moment if what I've shared with you resonates, and if you feel like, yes, this is the right step for me. And the last thing I'd say about that before we open out to questions and reflections from you all is you'll know for yourself if this is right, if this is the right moment. I'm not interested in selling something to you or trying to convince you that this is the right path or practice for you, because that never works. But you'll know within yourself if this is the right next step for you. You'll feel it right now in your body. You'll know in your heart, however you want to frame it, that this is the next part of your educational process, or the next thing that you'd like to do for yourself, or your next gift to give into the world. So do check in with yourself. It's very easy for the mind to take over and find lots of reasons why it is or isn't the time, but just really trust into that deeper felt sense of knowing within yourself. And if that's true for you, we'd love to see you join the program. So thank you so much for listening. I'd love to open it out now to any questions or reflections that you might have. Very willing to answer pretty much any question. I'm not saying I have the answers to every question, but if there's something that you'd like to ask about in terms of the program content or something that I've talked about, feel free to either use the reactions button at the bottom of Zoom there. If you click on reactions, you'll see that there's a raise hand function. So you can raise your hand if you have a question or reflection or something that you'd like to share or bring forward. And we'd love to hear from you, because these questions can really bring things alive, and it may be that I missed something back along the way. So your questions can really help that too. Hi, Margaret. Hello. See you have your hand up. Feel free to unmute yourself, and please do bring your question forward.
Well, first I want to thank you for, offering what you've done today. And already I've gained an understanding of the sankalpa that I did not have before. I thought it had to be this lifelong, deep, as opposed to right now, I just need to be still. So I just thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. Can I share something, Margaret, for you and for everyone else as well, which is what's really juicy about that is that in some ways that lifelong sankalpa thing that unfolds when we listen to what we need for now. Because here's a game, and this is something I'll talk about in the training in depth. when we get in touch with, right now I just need stillness, and we ask ourselves, okay, if I had that stillness in spades, if that was really instilled in my life, might there be something else that I want underneath it? And the answer to that might be world peace, or the next BMW 7 Series, or whatever it might be. So we're going to ask, okay, and then if I had that, is there anything else I want? And just by getting clear on these very simple intentions, we get quite quickly down to what we really want. And what's beautiful is that we all have a different flavor. We all have a different something to offer into the world. But most of the time, those very deep wishes that we have are so simple. Most of us want tranquility, calm, maybe to live a life of feeling loving or connected or belonging. They're really, very, very simple. So I think when we stop tying ourselves up in loops with a kind of mental idea of, what I should be doing in the world, and get in touch with what we need in that simple way, it can help uncover that deep desire over time. So anyway, Margaret, do carry on. I'd love to hear more from you.
Thank you.
Margaret, you've disappeared. Did you have a further question or anything else to share?
Well, I've done a few Yoga Nidra classes, and some felt a bit intrusive, as if I was being propelled at either a pace or not really a direction, but it just felt a little, I'm not sure where I am. And therefore, I'm not sure if I want that next thing you're talking about, whoever the person offering the practice was. And so, were I to become a teacher, I would want to have I don't know if it's reading the room or just a deep personal sense of when you don't know everyone in the room, how can you take care?
Yeah, for sure. I think you said it beautifully. I think when we are present ourselves and we have a degree of what's called empathic resonance, when we're feeling into the tone that's in the room and the pace that's in the room, it can really inform how quickly we might move through the practice or what's needed. And then there's another couple of additions that you'll learn about in the training, which is, firstly, the way that I'm sharing this is invitational and inquiry based. So it's not, I want you to feel this, but as you sense into your body, what do you notice? So it's actually asking people to really bring their own experience into the whole thing. So it's not prescriptive or instructive, but it's inquiry based and curious. What's actually really happening? And I think one of the ways that we can deepen that curiosity as a facilitator is to talk to and interview the groups that we work with. So, for example, if we're going to talk about emotional intelligence and welcoming emotions, we can talk with our group. What kind of emotions come up for you? What's in your experience? What's that like? What do you think about this proposition of welcoming yourself as you are, about allowing certain emotions that you've refused before? And some people are saying, no, that's really scary. I don't want to do that. But you open out this very lively dialogue and you include people. And I think we become a really skillful facilitator when we're asking and curious, and when we're not the one that knows and is trying to prescribe or suggest, or even, I've listened to some Yoga Nidra recordings that are insistent on having you relax. My take on this would be, if you're feeling tense, what's that like? Can you inquire into it? What's here? So this curiosity and interest means that we can become a really great teacher in terms of not prescribing, but reading the room and being with our participants. And also the practice itself, the way that I'm teaching and sharing it, invites and invokes this inquiry and this curiosity as to what's going on within us. And people will love that, and they will find it beautiful, and they will thank you for it, because despite the idea No one wants to sit in a room with someone that believes they think they know what's going on in the other person. But everyone wants to sit with someone who's curious about what's going on and wants to journey with them into their own experience. And I think there's something very beautiful that we can do in the world when we're facilitators rather than prescribers. So, yeah, I really appreciate your question. I can see you nodding away. I know that's landed well.
Yeah, makes good sense.
Yeah. Thanks for the question, Margaret. I really appreciate it. Yeah. Tara, hi. Yeah, you got your hand up. Yeah, feel free to come off mute.
I just have a question, James. I've practiced some of your Yoga Nidra in night time, the ones that you put on Eckhart Yoga. And I just have a question about dreams, the world of dreams, because when I have practiced your Yoga Nidra, I have found that my dreaming that night has been particularly pertinent and quite enlightening, actually. And I just wondered what you feel about that. And
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'll share this with you, and in some ways, this is a whole another webinar because the dream world's fascinating and beautiful. And I'm really pleased to hear that you've had, enlightening or enriching insight from your dreams. But neuroscience now says that when we dream at night, we're essentially emotionally processing. And when we practice Yoga Nidra, we enter into that hypnagogic state, which is right smack bang between thinking cognitive mode, which our brain is producing a predominance of beta waves, into this alpha state, this in between sleep and awake. And the next stage down is theta, which is what's produced in our brain when we're dreaming. So by practicing Yoga Nidra, we get quite close to that unconscious material, our dream material. And in the same way, when we're practicing Yoga Nidra, we may be lying there thinking, I'm just going to have a nice rest. And suddenly up pops a particular emotion or something that's really calling for our attention. So Yoga Nidra does invite and invoke and help us get much closer to the dream world. And in some ways is an invitation for the unconscious to really come through. It's an invitation for us to start to commune with whatever is down there. And what I mean by down there is that unconscious place where we placed maybe emotions that we were unable to process when we were 3 years old, or the altercation that we had with our partner or our boss last week, or that brief interaction that we had with someone that just didn't quite feel right and felt a little bit off. And the dream world helps us process all of that. And ultimately, we're learning to wake up to the dream world. We're learning to wake up to what's unconscious for us. So yeah, Yoga Nidra can be a very powerful way to get closer to our dreams, particularly when you wake in the middle of the night. And then we're maybe exploring the possibility of going back to sleep after we've done a middle of the night Yoga Nidra practice. And I know the ones you're talking about on Eckhart Yoga, they're designed to sort of fade away rather than wake the person back up. And then we go back into the last section of sleep, which is all about that REM, that dream sleep. That's where we do most of our dreaming, in the early hours of the morning. So that's probably helping you get much closer and have more of a vivid relationship with dreaming. Yoga Nidra in some ways is about, as much as it is about thinking, it's about images and sensations. And they're the language of the unconscious. Our unconscious is always presenting to us through feeling. I mean, we all know this. If you wake up from a dream, it's what you saw and how you felt. You know, like, oh, that was a lovely dream. I'd love to go back there. Or, oh, that was, there's feeling is a big theme within it. So I'm not sure whether that fully answers your question, Tara, but sounds like you're having a multiple time.
yeah, thank you very much. And also, may I also say that it's having an effect on my sleep as well. That I'm sleeping much more deeply, much more comfortably. Just more relaxed in myself. And it comes out in the day as well, as you're saying, as you were mentioning, my relationships with people, having more feelings for others, and being able to respond to others in a more open manner and be more in touch with who I am.
Yeah, beautiful share. Thank you so much. And for all of us as we're listening, I think we can recognize that sleep problems are around the world problem. And I know with some of the different ways I've had of reaching out to my community and sharing this stuff in public forums, when I talk about sleep, suddenly everyone's paying attention. So if you're listening to this and thinking, oh, how can I bring this forward into the world, doing a course or even a workshop on sleeping deeply with Yoga Nidra could be just really such an amazing thing to offer your community or offer as a public service. And people will absolutely love that, and it will be a game changer. People around the world are using Yoga Nidra to either fall asleep or get back to sleep in the middle of the night. And it really works. It's really powerful. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing your experience, Tara. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, James. Thank you very much for your talk. Thank you.
Maybe time for another question or two before we slip away into our respective lives. Anybody else have anything to ask or share? Let me have a little look in the chat box here just to see what might be. So one question there, how do you personally teach Yoga Nidra? For example, on Zoom or in person? So the answer to that would be I do both, actually. And I run a regular weekly class that I do via Zoom, which is people all over the world coming and dialing it in. And it works wonderfully because people can rest in the comfort of their own lounge on their sofa or in their bed and listen and follow the practices and engage in the talks. And then at the end of that, click end call and drift off to sleep. And out of all of the different offerings that might be out there via Zoom, I think Yoga Nidra works beautifully. If I'm teaching a group something in depth and I really want to invite and take people into this exploration of welcoming, this very loving tantric embrace of our whole self, I like to do that in person because there's something about people being together in a group and something about collective vulnerability that is gorgeous and very empowering. So I think it's really great to be able to offer Yoga Nidra both in person and also as something that you can actually offer online as well. And you'll know for yourselves what feels like the best approach for you. Some people are not fans of wanting to sit behind a screen. Other people, it really works. I'm a fairly introverted person, so I quite like being at home in my little strange cave here and just popping up on screen every now and again. But I also really love sitting with people and being in presence with everyone too. So there's lots of different ways that you can work with this practice. So, having had a look through the chat, there's no questions that are popping to me yet, and we're coming up to the hour. So I feel like hopefully you've taken something from our time together today. Maybe you learned something about Yoga Nidra. If you'd like to join the program, we'd love to have you come and join us. I'd love to meet you personally in one of those coaching sessions. And hopefully you can then go out into the world and share this beautiful practice with all of the people that are restless. Marie, you've got your hand in the air. Yeah, please.
Hello, James.
Hello.
Well, first I've been practicing with your guidance many times, and I found it very, very nice. And I've been so already inquiring about Yoga Nidra teaching, but with the classical steps. And I wanted to know if your course was based on the traditional Yoga Nidra, or if you, although I don't know, take from iRest or other protocols, or
Yeah, sure. So the training that we put together on Eckhart Yoga is based on the traditional, what's called a 5 kosha model. So it will walk you through the journey of Yoga Nidra as being taught as a general theme out there. Where it becomes slightly specialist, I guess, or it's my own flavor of offering, is that there's much more of a focus on emotional intelligence, on working with the inner world of emotions, feelings, and thoughts. Typically, Yoga Nidra practices tend to go very lightly over that. There may be the offering of a kind of mindfulness phase where we're noting, where we're observing the mind. But what's very different about what I'm sharing with you all through this course is the possibility of really proactively engaging with visiting guests of emotion and thoughts and beliefs. That doesn't tend to be across the board. So that would give you some tools that will possibly stand out or be maybe a little bit different to the mainstream offering of Yoga Nidra. But yeah, it does cover those 5 koshas, and it certainly lines up pretty nicely with a classical system. But of course, as this practice gets more and more shared in the world, there are so many iterations and variations of it out there. It's getting more and more colourful by the day, shall we say. But yeah, it does follow a classical system, Marie.
okay. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for your time. It's been wonderful to spend this hour with you. I'm very grateful to be here. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and really look forward to seeing those of you who can join the program. And hopefully we'll see each other online again. Okay. Thanks so much, everyone. Wishing you well. Good night.